This story was sent in by someone we'll call Aaron. He told me this happened in 2017 and it still keeps him up some nights. Aaron grew up in a small wooded town in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and strangers stand out like neon signs. On July 28th of that year, Aaron's friend James invited a few close friends to a secluded lake house that James's uncle owned but rarely used. It was meant to be a chill weekend. Some grilling, fishing, and drinking. Nothing wild. There were 4 of them total. Aaron, James, their friend Alex, and a girl named Sarah that Aaron had just started seeing. They arrived early that Friday afternoon. The house was exactly what you'd expect from an old lake property. Wood-paneled walls, creaky floors, and that distinct scent of musty curtains and trapped dust. But it sat on a gorgeous private lake, no other houses in sight, and surrounded by trees on all sides. At first, it was perfect. They went for a swim, grilled some food, and cracked open beers as the sun started to dip behind the tree line. Around 11 p.m., after the fire pit had burned down to glowing embers, Sarah pointed out how clear the sky was. Stars everywhere, no light pollution, you could see the Milky Way. That's when Alex, who had smoked a little too much weed, suggested they take the old canoe out to the center of the lake to look at the stars from the water. It sounded romantic and harmless enough, so Aaron and Sarah agreed to go with him. James stayed behind to clean up a bit and finish his drink. They climbed into the rickety aluminum canoe, with Aaron paddling them out into the still, black water. The air was cool, and aside from the paddle breaking the surface every few seconds, it was silent. They got about halfway out before Aaron stopped paddling. The water was so calm, the canoe barely drifted. That's when Sarah asked, "What's that on the other side of the lake?" Aaron and Alex turned. At first they didn't see anything, but then, maybe 200 yards away, they spotted a small, flickering orange light among the trees. It looked like a lantern, or maybe a candle, except there weren't supposed to be any other houses on this lake. James had specifically said they'd be alone out here. They all stared. The light didn't move, but it shimmered, almost like it was swaying back and forth. Alex, trying to ease the tension, joked, "Maybe Bigfoot learned how to use fire." Nobody laughed. Then Sarah whispered, "It's moving." Sure enough, the light was now bobbing side to side, slowly, steadily, and coming closer to the lake's edge. Not fast, just steady, like someone walking through the woods with a lantern. Only they couldn't see a person, just that glow coming closer and closer. "Time to go," Aaron said. He started paddling again, harder this time, and as he did, the light suddenly stopped. It paused at the tree line and then extinguished completely. Just gone. They didn't speak again until they were back on the dock. When they got inside, James looked confused. "Everything okay?" he asked. Aaron said something vague like, "We saw a weird light." James didn't press. They all went to bed not long after that, but the night wasn't over. Aaron was sleeping in the upstairs bedroom with Sarah when he woke up around 3:20 in the morning. At first he didn't know why he woke up, then he realized he was freezing. The window was wide open, which was weird because they'd shut it earlier. He got up to close it, and that's when he saw it. A light. On the lake. Not across the shore this time. On the water. It wasn't a lantern, it was more like a candle set on something floating, like a small board or piece of driftwood just sitting there in the middle of the lake, burning steady. Aaron stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. Then something happened that chilled him to his core. The light moved, not floating like it had caught the current, but gliding in a perfectly straight line toward the dock. He shut the blinds and backed away from the window. but curiosity got the better of him a few minutes later. When he peeked out again, the candle was gone. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Aaron asked James again. Was he sure there were no neighbors? James swore up and down they were the only ones on that lake. His uncle had specifically bought the land because it was isolated. Later that afternoon, they went to explore the far side of the lake to see if maybe someone had built a new cabin. They hiked through the woods for nearly 2 hours. Nothing, no house, no trail, no sign that anyone had ever been there. They left early that evening. Nobody felt like staying another night. But here's where things get even stranger. 2 days later, Aaron got a text from James. It was a photo of the lake house, or what was left of it. It had burned down. The fire department said it started late Sunday night, likely from unattended candles, but none of them had lit any candles that night, or brought any with them. When Aaron asked how James found out, James said his uncle had one up to the property that Monday morning to check on the place. And here's the kicker, the fire chief told him they found a canoe drifted onto the opposite shore. Inside were 3 melted candles and a trail of wet footprints leading away from it. That was the last time Aaron went anywhere near that lake, and to this day, he refuses to spend July 28th in the woods. This next story happened to a girl named Kayla in 2016 in a rural part of Colorado. She was 19 at the time and had just moved into her first apartment alone after leaving college for personal reasons. Her place wasn't anything extravagant, just a small 1-bedroom unit in a converted farmhouse outside of town. Rent was cheap because of how isolated it was, and isolation is key here. No neighbors, no complex security, and the nearest police station was a good 20-minute drive away. She moved in around mid-July, and for the first week or so, everything was uneventful. She spent her time unpacking, trying to find a job in the area, and just adjusting to being on her own. She liked the solitude at first, said it helped her sort her thoughts out. But as the second week crept in, she started noticing something strange. It started on the night of July 27th, one day before everything went completely off the rails. She was lying in bed, watching some show on her laptop with her back facing the window. Her bedroom overlooked a patch of dense woods that ran for miles in both directions. Around 2 a.m., she heard what sounded like tapping on the glass behind her. She paused the show, turned around, and saw nothing. She figured it might have been a tree branch or even an animal, since that wasn't uncommon out there. Still, she said she couldn't shake the feeling that it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. She didn't sleep much that night. The next evening, July 28th, things escalated. Kayla had been out during the day looking for work, and when she got back around 6 p.m., she noticed something odd. Her bedroom window was slightly cracked open. Now, keep in mind, she was absolutely certain she had locked it. She was paranoid about stuff like that, especially being alone and so far from town. But there it was, ajar, like someone had pried it open and not quite closed it all the way. She checked around the house, even inside closets and under the bed, but found nothing out of place. It spooked her, but she tried to brush it off. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe she had left it unlocked by mistake. That was the only logical explanation, right? Still, she kept the lights on that night. Around 11:30 p.m., Kayla was curled up on her couch, scrolling through her phone, when she heard a noise from the bedroom. Something soft, but sharp, like the creak of a floorboard under pressure. Her body tensed instantly. She hadn't been in that room since earlier, and no one else should have been in the house. She stood up slowly and grabbed the closest thing that resembled a weapon, a heavy table lamp. She moved toward the hallway, heart pounding, when suddenly the light in the bedroom cut out, just flicked off. She froze. Her bedroom didn't have any fancy motion sensors or timers. The only way that light could have turned off was if someone flipped the switch or pulled the plug. Her instincts screamed at her to leave. So that's what she did. She bolted out the front door barefoot, jumped in her car, and backed down the long gravel driveway without even looking behind her. She drove straight to a gas station in town and called the police from there. The cops showed up at her place about 40 minutes later. When Kayla met them there, she said they treated her kindly at first, but with a subtle dose of skepticism, the way officers do when they're used to false alarms. They searched the house thoroughly and again didn't find anyone inside. No signs of forced entry, no clear evidence that someone had broken in. But they did find something off. In the dirt, directly below her bedroom window, were several fresh boot prints, heavy, deliberate steps leading to and from the woods behind the house. And under the window, partially buried beneath the dirt, was something that didn't belong to Kayla. A hunting knife, old and dull, but still very much a weapon. That was enough to get the police to take things more seriously. They told her they'd patrol the area more frequently and suggested she find somewhere else to stay for the next few nights just to be safe. Kayla took their advice and crashed with an old friend in town for the weekend. But here's where the story gets even darker. When she returned the following Monday to grab more clothes, something new was waiting on her porch. A single Polaroid photo in an envelope. No note, no writing, just the photo, and what it showed made her blood run cold. It was a picture of her, taken from outside the bedroom window. It had to have been from that same night because she was wearing the same clothes. In the image, she was lying on her side, in bed, laptop still open, completely unaware that someone was outside watching her. Someone had been standing just beyond the tree line, camera in hand, taking pictures of her through the window. And from the angle, it looked like the camera was held at eye level, meaning the photographer had probably been inside the window frame or right up against it. That was the final straw. Kayla moved out that same day, terminating her lease and refusing to step foot back in that house. Police were called again, of course, but with no usable prints, no surveillance footage, and no leads, there was little they could do. To this day, Kayla doesn't know who the man behind the window was. A drifter, a stalker, someone who'd been watching the house for a while and chose that night, July 28th, to finally make his move. What disturbed her most wasn't just that she'd been watched. It was that whoever it was had likely been inside while she was in another room, quiet, calculating, confident enough to get in and out without leaving a trace, except that knife. And the picture. She says the worst part is knowing it probably wasn't his first time watching her, just the first time she noticed. This last story comes from a guy named Lucas who sent it in anonymously a few years ago. It happened back in 2013 on, you guessed it, July 28th during a weekend camping trip with his older cousin, Derek, and two of Derek's friends, Sam and Tyler. They were in high school at the time, just a bunch of suburban kids looking for a little adventure before the summer ended. The group decided to head out to a secluded campground in northern Oregon near Mount Hood. It wasn't an official campsite, more like a little-known clearing off an unmarked forest road, something Derek found through some online forum. The appeal was how off-grid it was. No cell service, no park rangers, no rules. It sounded perfect at the time. They packed up their gear, loaded into Derek's old SUV, and drove out that Friday. It took almost 3 hours of winding roads and rough terrain to reach the spot. When they finally got there, it was everything they'd hoped for. Silent, peaceful, surrounded by thick pine trees, with a small river nearby. No other campers. Just nature. The first night went smoothly. They pitched 2 tents, cooked hot dogs over a fire, and shared ghost stories under the stars. You know, classic teenage camping stuff. They all turned in around 1 a.m. and everything was quiet until the next morning. Then came July 28th. Things started to feel wrong, not immediately, but gradually, like a creeping pressure that built up over the day. Lucas said it began with the silence. That kind of silence you only notice when you're out in the woods, where there's always some background noise, birds, bugs, wind in the trees, but that morning, nothing, just an unnatural heavy stillness. Even the river nearby seemed quieter than usual, like the whole forest was holding its breath. They joked about it at first, called it Blair Witch weather, but as the day wore on, that uneasy feeling didn't go away. Around 5 p.m., Sam wandered into the woods to relieve himself and came back looking pale and shaken. When they asked what happened, he swore he saw a person standing about 40 or 50 feet away, just barely visible through the trees. He said the guy was wearing some kind of cloak or robe, standing perfectly still, facing him, not moving, not speaking. When Sam called out, the figure didn't respond. He just kept standing there until Sam turned and bolted back to camp. Of course, the others didn't believe him at first. They thought he was messing with them, trying to amp up the creep factor. But Sam wasn't the joking type, and Lucas said you could see in his eyes that he was rattled. Still, they didn't pack up. Typical teenage logic. One weird sighting wasn't enough to ruin the trip. That night, everything went to hell. They sat around the fire, trying to laugh it off, but the unease was still thick. By around midnight, they were all ready to crash, so they doused the fire and climbed into their tents, Lucas and Sam in one, Derek and Tyler in the other. Sometime around 3 a.m., Lucas woke up to the sound of crunching leaves outside. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a deer, but then he realized something strange. The footsteps were pacing back and forth around the tents, slow, deliberate. Sam was still asleep, but Lucas lay frozen, holding his breath. He listened as the footsteps circled the tent again, and then stopped. And that's when it happened. He heard a voice, but not like someone speaking normally. This was quiet, strained, like someone was muttering to themselves just inches from the tent wall. Lucas couldn't make out the words, but the tone was wrong. Not angry, not sad, just off, like it didn't belong to a sane person. He finally reached over and shook Sam awake. Sam whispered, "What?" And before Lucas could respond, they both heard it. A second voice. This one from the other side of the tent. Then, from across the site, they heard Derek shout, "Who's out there?" That was followed by the sound of a tent zipper and Derek stumbling out into the clearing. Lucas and Sam jumped out a second later, flashlights in hand. What they saw chilled them. Derek was standing barefoot near the fire pit, shining his light into the woods. Tyler was behind him, eyes wide, shaking. They all heard it then. Movement. Quick, darting sounds in the trees, like someone, or something, was circling them again, faster now. Each time they pointed their lights toward the sound, it was gone. No animal runs like that, not in complete silence, not with intent. Suddenly something whizzed through the air and struck the side of Lucas's tent with a sharp thunk. When they checked, it was a rock, smooth, round, but thrown with serious force. That was enough. They didn't pack up, they didn't grab gear, they just ran for the SUV and floored it out of there. Derek drove like a man possessed, speeding down that butte. MPI trail with no lights except the headlights, tires bouncing over roots and rocks. When they finally got back to a main road, they didn't stop until they reached a gas station in the nearest town. None of them ever went back. Here's the part that stayed with Lucas the most. About 2 weeks later, he got a text from Sam that included a photo. Sam had been going through the pictures from the trip, the ones they took on the first day, and he noticed something. In one photo, taken of the group around the campfire, there's a figure in the background, just barely visible between two trees, a tall, dark shape, cloaked, watching. Whatever was in that forest on July 28th, it wasn't just passing through, it knew they were there, it waited, and it wanted them to know it was watching,